Getting inspiration from outside sources, and specifically other sectors, can be hugely beneficial for you to get a fresh take on things. Better yet, it stands to give you inspiration for new ideas that could help give you a tidy advantage over your competitors. Now, the charity sector becomes very interesting when you consider they don't actually sell a tangible service or product. People quite literally give them money. But how do they do that? And if we were to dig into their secret sauce, what could we in B2B marketing learn and apply to our own businesses? Hello, good afternoon. My name's James Rostance, and this is the 414 Live, coming to you live this Thursday afternoon, live and exclusive to LinkedIn Live. This show is for you if you are a professional B2B marketer, whether you work in-house at a company or agency side, so that you can expand and enhance your professional knowledge each and every week. So we're kicking off, which is technically season 3 now of the show, and we've got a pretty cool topic or thread for the show today, and that's looking into what we can learn from the charity sector as B2B marketers. Now, joining me live to help with all of this, joining me live from Moreira in the Costa Blanca, somewhere on the coast of Spain, please welcome Mr. Andrew Davis.
Hey, how you doing, James? Thanks a lot for having me.
But a pleasure, thank you. And thank you for the help in pronouncing your fine town where you're currently working from. Moreira, yes. Because, now, if I've got this right, you work there for a few months of the year, and then you also come back to the UK and fly around the world to do your training. So talk me through the setup there.
Yeah, back and forth. So might be here for 2 weeks, then back in London for 2 weeks, or wherever my training or my keynote talks take me.
Which is an awesome, awesome lifestyle. Love it. Well, let's dive right into this then. So, with the topic in hand, I'm just going to refer to my notes here to get the question exactly right. Could you please tell me then, Andrew, what is it that the charity sector does well, and in turn, B2B could learn from?
So, I guess when you look at the different sectors, whether it be B2B, B2C, or the charity sector, or even the public sector, what I've noticed over the years of training, and I've been training for about 11 years, it's some sectors are very good at some things and some are not so good at. And what the charity sector is really good at doing is storytelling. I think out of all the sectors, I think charity, purely because of how they've always worked in the traditional world, has been pretty good at telling a story online. And the reality is, whether you're in the B2B world or B2C, whatever world you are in, everyone is telling a story. So most people, though, are telling a bad story. The charity sector, they kind of get a good grasp of storytelling. And it's something that the B2B world really needs to understand, especially because you're taking your clients or potential clients on a journey.
Yes. Now, there has been, and I imagine you've noticed it as well, a bit of a drive for people to get into storytelling for the benefit of their business as a whole. But as you say, yes, it's B2B. This is one of the things we do lag at. So, could you, to help with this, then explain exactly what is storytelling from your perspective to help with this?
Sure. So, from my perspective, telling a story is taking people on a journey. And when you really break down stories, you can get stories from films, you can get it from books, you can get it from television, you can get it from like when you're just chatting one-to-one with your friends. Because whenever you remember something, it's usually you're telling a story. So it's like, oh, do you remember when this happened? Or do you remember when that happened? For me, when it comes to online, the type of story that you should, especially B2B organizations, should look at is from films. Now, when it comes to films, there's only 7 stories that they tell in films. And the story that we are delivering in an online environment is the hero story. And the hero story is that I'm going about my day, something happens, now I must defeat this in order to get whatever may be on the other side. And that essentially is the structure of the story that we're telling in a digital environment. Now, where we need to, because a lot of your listeners in the B2B space will understand about lead generation and taking people on a story and the user journey. All of these things is part of story. And when you break down the structure of a story, especially a story in the hero story, you are taking somebody, i.e. the hero, on a journey. And that essentially is when you break down storytelling, ultimately what it is. And a good story, all it does is just answers questions. It just answers questions throughout the whole film or the book or whatever it may be.
So it sounds like there's a formula of sorts to this then. Right? Would you be prepared to share this formula then, so that we can really get to grips and understand, I guess, ultimately how we can do this as well?
Sure. So when you break down story, now I learned about story. I used to work for the BBC. I worked in radio, and working in radio, your aim is to keep listeners listening for 3 hours or however long your show is. So I've done a lot of storytelling there. And when I left radio, that's when I started working at MySpace. So part of the team to launch MySpace, and it was a different structure of story, but ultimately story sat within that. And what you'll see, whether you're Pixar, whether you're Disney or any of the other studios, story, the hero story follows a similar process. And it usually goes to, the first thing they identify is who's the hero. Every B2B organization will need to identify who's the hero. And most companies will say, okay, well, the hero is the users, which is correct. However, when you look at your content, you will say things like, we've been established since 1976, or look at the awards that we've won. As soon as you start putting yourselves in the story, you're making yourselves the hero. And at best, your customer, who should be the hero, will say things like, oh, good for you, or well done. But it doesn't drive them, because story is about emotion. So that's the first thing, is who's the hero? The reason why charities get this well is because charities are used to dealing with different people. So for example, you look at a charity that deals with cancer. You've got somebody who's got cancer. That's one person who their content or their messaging and communication should be towards, and that's one hero. But then you've also got their family, and they're going to hear a different message. So that's another hero. You've also got people who donate money. That's another hero. You might have media companies. That's another hero. You might have partnerships, whatever it may be. You'll start noticing it, many different types of people. So charities are used to dealing with at least 2 or 3. In B2B, we might have what's called personas. So it's like, this is our target audience, and this is Jim, and Jim looks like this. But with that worked in the traditional world. But what we want to be able to do now is put that second layer on top of it, which is more the psychographics, because of social media and the fact that how people consume content. So traditionally, TV, radio, or print. Now, thousands of ways, which means you can reach all of your different audiences. So the first thing is, who's the hero? And then, what is their problem? What is the problem that they're trying to solve? Because if you really think about the film, if you don't know who's the hero, what they ultimately want, and what's stopping them getting that, if you don't know that within the first 20, 25 minutes, you'll say things like, this film is really slow, or I have no idea what's going on right now. So really what the key thing is, the first part is identifying who's the hero. And the reality is that the hero is going to have challenges. And the first challenge that they're going to face is some villain. And that's going to be something that's stopping them getting to the end goal. Then they're going to have, because the film really is based on the villain affecting the hero, but then it's the self-belief of the hero as well. And then you take them on a journey to build that up. They're kind of the two, there's a few other challenges, but they're the 2 main challenges. Now, as B2B, we need to identify who's the hero or our target audience. What do they ultimately want as well? Then we need to understand the challenges. What are the things that's facing them externally? It could be time. it could be money, it could be pressure from the boss, it could be all of these external things that's stopping them ultimately buying your product or developing into a qualified lead. What makes the film is the journey, as I said, the self-belief. And this essentially is what's going to make a person who potentially is a potential customer to potentially be your customer. So, and that's to do with what are the internal things that's driving them? How do they feel? What is their status at work? What is what's going on with them right now? Because we need to, charities has always been about marketing to the emotion. And what you look at a lot of the big, even the B2C organizations, they market to the emotion. And I feel with B2B, we're quite logical. We're quite, okay, this is our targets and we need to reach these targets. And all this reach and the emotional thing, it's all, that's a bit fluffy. But the reality is, in this digital world, where people lose sales or organizations lose sales before they're even aware of the opportunity, because people are searching and typing and researching, we need to understand that. So the first thing is, this is the hero. The second thing is, these are the challenges facing the hero. And then the third area, now the first two, again, I got this from like Pixar as well, and the BBC. This bit I actually got from a guy called Donald Miller. I must give him credit for this. And he's identified ourselves as the guide. We need to be speaking as if we are Yoda, not Luke Skywalker. That we're Gandalf, not Frodo. Because they're the hero. They're going on the journey. We are the guide to help them along these steps. So when it comes to our marketing, we don't want to be saying, hey, look at us. We've been established since 1962. It's more, okay, this is their challenge. This is what's making them really tick internally. Let's connect that way. Let's connect to the emotion and speak as if we're a guide. And a guide needs to show authority. They need to understand the user, hence why they need to understand some of the internal things. And they definitely need to show a personality. And this is what another thing that really hurts B2B. It's the personality of an organization. B2B, as they say, people buy from people. So we need to really kind of emphasize that when it comes to our organizations as well. So that's kind of the three main structures of the story. Then you go into other things like call actions and giving the person a plan and seeing if it works, if it doesn't work, understanding what the sidekick's role is as well. And the sidekick, they say, I don't know if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, he talks about jabbing and crossing. And the jab is what builds up the value, and the cross is a sell, but you need the jab to deliver the sell. Because if you're just selling them the whole time, people are going to ignore you. The jab essentially in this context is based on the sidekick. And what I mean by that is a jab in B2B might be those fun pieces of content that's not delivered to sell, but delivered to awareness, engagement, which ultimately increases your reach. Then you can sell. That essentially is the sidekick. The sidekick is not on the journey, but you need the sidekick in the story. And that's essentially what when it comes to your content and when it comes to telling stories, is being able to put out content that is not always about selling. Sometimes your content is more to do with general awareness, general engagement, consistency as well. Because if you sell every single time that you put some piece of content online, people will just think, you're spam, you're selling to me again. And again, it doesn't make you the hero, because you're asking people to do something. So really, really important to understand. And I would say to people, really study story, because every successful company on digital, especially in social media areas and even search to an extent in your website, is telling a story.
Yes. You know what? For me, you hit it nicely on the head quite early on there when you said that if the viewer or listener's reaction is, oh, that's nice, you've lost them, because you're talking at them, you are selling to them. And not, I suppose for clarity, it's not a bad thing to be selling. In fact, no, you need to do that. But certainly what you're advocating here and what I'm picking up is you can't be just selling all the time. You've got to give value. And this secret sauce, if you will, which the charity sector does oh so well, is in delivering stories. And you're then wrapping, I guess, your business message or a business teaching within that story. Is that a good way of summarizing that?
Yes, because ultimately you're taking people on a journey. So, because you're taking people on a journey, I can't remember who said, I think his name is Richard Etuavro. He said the best leadership skill is storytelling. And because you're leading people down the sales funnel or the user journey, whatever you want to call it, story is the best way to get them. And identifying who is the person that you're taking down that story, what's going to make them find out a bit more and a bit more, or research more, and then how you're going to communicate to them as I said, Yoda, not Luke Skywalker. And these are some of the key things when it comes to storytelling. And like I said, identifying who's the hero for me is the number one thing that B2B organizations struggle with. They'll have an idea, but sometimes what I find, it's more of a traditional idea. And that worked in a world without thousands of ways that people can find your information. That worked in a world where you didn't have to worry so much about people researching. And as I said, people will do their research way before you're even aware of the opportunity to sell to them.
With you. Well, you know what? Linking off the back of that, Bina Miller's watching. Hello, Bina. Bina asked, she jumped in quite early, actually, but with this question, which is, could you please give us an example of a B2B story?
Of a B2B story? So
yes.
So first off, if you're in the B2B, you need to kind of identify your target audience or hero. Now, that might be... like I said, it might be, let's say if I'm selling some form of software, it might be how you speak to potential marketers. Now, that also might be partners that you work with to get the message out there. That also, as you know, it might even be who you recruit as well. So you're going to have different people who you're going to tell a message to. Mm-hmm. So how you go about speaking to each of them will differ slightly. Slightly going off the question, just because I just remembered, charities, a lot of their storytelling is about recruitment. Now, they might call it volunteers, but ultimately they want people to come and work for them for some value. Now, again, a lot of the smaller charities might not give value in this, when it comes to money, but they'll give them value in other ways. But your message delivered is different to each of them. So going back to Bina's question, can you just repeat the question again? Sorry. Yes,
it was, please can you give us an example of a B2B story?
Sure. So going back to Bina's question, so the first thing is identify the hero. So let's say, for example, the hero is a marketing manager and you're trying to sell them your SaaS product. Second thing you need to identify is, what do they ultimately want? And they might ultimately want to be indispensable to their organization. And then you can say, okay, well, what's stopping them? What is the villain? What is the external thing that's stopping them being indispensable? And let's say, for example, they work in digital. What's stopping them might be their boss doesn't respect social media, say, because social media, it's very difficult to measure from a hard metrics, if you get what I mean. So, with search, I'm top. It's easy to measure. With advertising, I spent this much, I got this much back. Social media, I got this many likes, I got this much engagement. Okay, so what? What does that mean? So their boss might not see that. So what we want to be able to then do as a part of the story is say, okay, well, we know what she ultimately wants. We know what the villain is, and the villain is, in this case, her boss doesn't understand her. What is the internal conversations that she's having with herself? And that could be, she might feel overwhelmed. She might feel underappreciated. She might feel busy because she's doing a lot of stuff and her boss only sees it as stuff. So she might feel underappreciated as well. So when it comes to our messaging out there, we need to be saying to Tina, Tina, I know that you feel overwhelmed. I know that sometimes it feels like you can't get an ROI in social media. But what our product does is it shows you the ROI. It shows you what you doing in Twitter or on Facebook, what it actually means, and proves that ROI that you can show anybody in your company, from the boss to the investors all the way down to the intern. You'll realize that after a while, in a few years, or even a few months, you'll become indispensable to this company because they can't make a decision really without the insights. And you're the one that's providing that to them. And yes, you may love your company, but what we also want to do is show you that it doesn't matter what company you work for. With this knowledge, you can go about working anywhere, regardless whether it be a pandemic or not. That essentially is when you start going into a story that you're telling when it comes to your marketing and your communications. But the key is understanding what that person's challenges is, because your message will change every time. Because another B2B story could be, okay, well, how do we get the best graduates? And the best graduates, their indispensable might be, I just want a job, because it's very difficult out there right now. But you might be telling a story to the media or the press media, the trade press. And that story might be, what's the exclusive? We want to be able to get as many hits to our website. So what can you do to provide us? So story, really, you're going to be telling many different stories. And as I said, I keep on going back to it. The crux of any story is the hero and their challenges.
Nice. Well, actually, Bina's followed up from that. And thank you, by the way. I'm keeping it unusually quiet during this interview because what you're coming out with really is complete gold with this. And I do want everyone watching to be able to really absorb and retain what you're sharing. So thank you. So she asks, what, in your opinion, have you seen that's a great B2B story? So looking at companies that have done this well. So here we go. Case study examples, I suppose.
Sure. So B2B companies that's done this well. So there's different levels. So if you look at the top B2B companies, i.e. Accentures, the Deloittes, the KPMGs, what I mean, top very large revenue very large revenue turnover. They're very good because they got into digital early, because what you'll find with a lot of these professional service networks, they're going to have 4 or 5 key things that they're going to focus on throughout the year. And then they're going to have to tell a story around it. Also, I think it's Deloitte. They're telling a story on Instagram. So it's an actual example. I believe it's Deloitte or one of the big 4 or 5. They use Instagram for graduates. And they tell a story about what's it like working for Deloitte all across the world. So they'll have takeovers from Denmark graduates this week, Sweden graduates next week, Finland graduates the other week, whatever it may be in the UK. So the story that they're telling is from the eyes of another graduate who's the mentor to say to new potential graduates, come and work for us. Because the reason they tell it that way is because, as I said, a guide has done what the hero wants in a lot of the cases. So Hamish has completed the Hunger Games, and that's why he's the guide to Katniss in the Hunger Games, because he's done it. So that's why they use the graduates to tell the story rather than a 60-year-old man who's worked there for the last 40 years. So they can relate. That's the top ones. Medium ones, sites like a lot of the SaaS sites. So HubSpot is really good. What are they called? Buffer is really good. Hootsuite, especially in the digital space, they're always telling a good story. They understand the importance of story and giving people as well a plan, and almost saying to them, if you don't go with us, this is what can happen. If you do go with us, this is what can happen. It's that pain pleasure theory. Mm-hmm. When it comes to smaller ones, it usually goes down to a lot of individuals, and they'll make themselves out to be what's called now influencers. So essentially an influencer, a good influencer, acts like a guide rather than they're the hero. Hey, look at me. It's more, hey, how can I help you? And again, plenty in this B2B space. In fact, if you look at a lot of the guests that you have, James, you could really turn around and say they're examples. I know Chris that you had on, Chris Branch, who does Seed to Branch. He's a good person to look at as well. Yeah. So that's kind of 3 different tiers who are telling different stories with different budgets as well, and different resources as well.
Nice. I was chuckling there when you mentioned Chris, because for everyone watching, right now Andrew can't see the show's feed. He's looking at a camera as we're doing this. But as you were talking there, Chris Branch is actually watching right now, and he says, "Heroes and their challenges love it." Clapping emoji.
Brilliant.
So that's good. Bina's coming in with a third question. We've got to do that. She's officially top viewer of today's show. Thank you, Bina. Would like to give a quick shout out though to Troy Matthews. He's watching Wasim Ansari. And of course Joe Hilder, official friend of the show, and Sam Hemphill. Hey Sam, how are you? All right, so. If anyone else watching would also like to throw in a question, because I feel you're doing these incredibly well, Andrew, and it would be a shame to let the opportunity go to waste. So if you watching right now would also like to put in a question, then please do it in the comments box, and we'll give you a 414 official shout out and put the question to Andrew, who is live in Moraida in the Costa Blanca this afternoon. So, Chris Branch gives you double hand. What's the hand where the two hands are together? Is that playing? No, it's
like this or like this with the things coming off.
They're vertical.
Like this?
No, yeah, like that.
So that's praying. Thank you.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, emoji.
It might become apparent that I'm not an expert in emojis, but thank you for filling that in.
There's a site called Emojipedia. It's worth going onto that if you want to know about emojis. Yeah, Emojipedia.
I might need to sign up to that. Okay, well, double praying and double smiley face for your reply there is what you're awarded. All right. So, Bina follows on saying, so this is getting specific now, how would a SaaS company do this? This is for applying storytelling to a SaaS company.
Sure. So SaaS companies for me, one of the easier companies to do it. Ultimately, what you want as a SaaS company is to potentially, let's say, for example, get leads. So when you're sending them along the journey, your bit, let's say, for example, in The Devil Wears Prada, where she throws the phone in the fountain, that is the bit where says, I've made up my mind. I'm going to go with you, and that's essentially where the journey doesn't stop, because there could be sequels, but that's like where it you want to get people to. So you've got to take them along that way. Now, what SaaS companies, you might want to say, I want to demonstrate what I can do, but really, what you want to say is, how can this product help me or the hero? How can this product help this potential buyer? How can this product help their boss? How can this product help other people within media? How can this product help influencers? So when we talk about story, I keep on going back to this. Mm-hmm. It's going to be for example, that's 4 different types of people that you're going to be telling different types of story to. So that's the first thing I'll say. But ultimately, when it comes to SaaS organizations, we've identified the hero. Let's say, as I said, it's an influencer this time. If we can give it to an influencer, rather than us try to reach 1 million people, we can give it to 10 influencers and they may have 1 million each. So they kind of do the work for us. So we need to market to the influencer or influence the influencer. How we go about the story we tell them goes back to the same framework. I'm a big fan of frameworks. Influencer, what do they ultimately want? An influencer, so let's say they are not celebrity, but they're quite high. They ultimately want to look good in front of their audience and continue building to create a full-time career off of this. Okay, so then we need to think, how does my software help them do that? What do they want? Okay, what's stopping them achieving this? Going back to, it could be time, it could be money, it could be other influencers, it could be trolls, it could be all of these things. Then you've got to think, okay, internally, what makes them tick? They might feel, they might love their job. They may get a lot of excitement. Excitement's a big thing. However, they also might feel frustrated because they're not top. They're there almost, but they're frustrated. They might have some form of sadness. They might have some form of disappointment. They might feel anxious. All of these things. So when it comes to pitching to them, again, going back to what I was saying before, It's we've got this software that I understand that you, an influencer, trolls is a massive distraction. But what we've got is this piece of software that shows that not only can we help celebrities, but we've actually really can help the macro influencers or the micro influencers get to that next level. It helps you identify the trolls. It helps you identify who could be potential problems for you. And it does this. Also, because we want to make you look good in front of your audience, it helps you show who's the most important people in your audience. It does this. And I know that this is the number one in the market, but did you know that we now do this, which they don't? Because ultimately, we want to help you become indispensable. We want to help you become that full-time job because we understand where the future is going. And we really want to be part of your story and help you do that. Would you be interested in a demo? Just 5 minutes of your time. That's essentially how you're telling that story. So hopefully that makes sense. But it's the same framework regardless. You just need to identify the hero. You need to identify what they ultimately want and then the challenges that's facing them and then communicate in that way. And that's what charities have been doing for years.
Beautiful. Wow.
Sorry, one thing I'll add though. The biggest problem that charities face now is people are becoming immune to it. When we see the adverts on TV or, you know, when you're walking down the street, or remember the days we used to walk down the street? You're walking down the street and someone would stop you and say, hey, and I have a pinboard and then you pretend you're on the phone and whatever it may be to ignore them. But we've become immune to that story now. So we can see extreme poverty and we just be like, okay, just continue eating or whatever it may be. So with charity sectors, they're going to have to pivot and tell a stronger story. B2B, it's up for grabs. They can still tell that story because we're not necessarily used to that in B2B. Now, we don't want to manipulate. And this is where it's really important to understand the importance of study more stories, study more content marketing as well. Social media is important, but that's more the platform. That's how you get the message across. But if you really want to understand story, learn story, go to Pixar but also understand the power of content, because content is the blood of everything in the digital space and everyone is creating content. So if everyone's creating content, everyone's telling a story. So what's going to make your story stand out to somebody else's?
Perfect. Could you just go over that? So sorry, the last bit, because it was breaking up. Okay. When you, it's almost like rewind 30 seconds for this. But yeah, the signal was dropping.
I'm trying to work out what I said. So I think I said the reality is content. Yeah. You need to master storytelling and content because they go hand in hand. Content is the blood of the internet. Anything you put in the digital space is content. So if you've got a website, if you've got a social media profile, if you've even sent a text message on WhatsApp, you put out content, which means you're a media company by default. That means you're competing against the BBC, you're competing against CNN, you're competing against Donald Trump, and you're competing against that 7-year-old YouTuber who's a multi-billionaire. Everyone is telling a story online. Everyone. It's just that 99% of people are telling a bad story. So what we want to be able to do as B2B organizations is really focus on storytelling and content to tell a better story. Social media, SEO, email, that's just the vehicle to get there. What we want to be able to understand is, okay, what makes a good story? And that's the structure I've told you. What content can we use to do that? And then that helps guide the content. Because when people say, right, create content, there could be anything. But now we need to be a bit more specific. And that's why, for me, I really focus on what I call the so what within content, or the so what within social media, or whatever it may be. And a lot of that goes down to the story that you tell.
Yes. Well, on the subject of creating B2B content, Andy Carter, hey Andy, asks, what advice do you have for creating B2B content and how often should you post?
Okay, so when it comes to creating content, there's 3 types of ways to create content. There's making content, which is the way that most people know, which is this. Again, what you do, James, videos, you're filming this, or you're taking pictures, or you're doing white paper reports, or long blog posts, and most of these content is either videos, images, text, and audio, and then you might have widgets, etc. That's making content, and you can do that. Another form of content is documenting. So rather than create content, you can document. And documenting is the reason why stories do well on Instagram, or stories do well on Snapchat. Because essentially you're not creating. Imagine if you were making stories, you would spend 3-4 hours to make something that lasts 15 seconds and disappears after 24 hours. After a while you think, so what? What's the point in that? Essentially, what people do is they document. They just document their lives, which means they don't necessarily have to think. They can just put content out there. They just film themselves, or that's one way. Or another way of documenting, stroke commenting. And that is people putting out content and you just commenting. And this is why, if you really take it back to when I first got into digital, which is back to moderate forums for the television show Pop Idol when the site Friends Reunited. I don't know if you remember that site.
Yes.
But what you would find is that people become popular because they would comment. They would leave comments. Same as Facebook groups now. So that's another form of content that you can create. You can just jump in the comments and start leading those conversations. The last is curating. And curating I call be the DJ. A DJ gets paid a lot of money to play other people's music. And that's essentially what curators do. They just find content that works with their audience and share. And they might put a sentence or two about what's good, or what they think, or try and get people's opinions. So when it comes to creating content, what's good B2B content, understand that these are 3 different ways you can go about creating content. And also, going back to making content, this video that we're filming now, we can transcribe this and we can put it in text form. We can take just the audio and we can put it in a podcast, and we can take stills and we can do pictures, because content is not linear. When I worked at the BBC, I worked on radio for radio shows. Now I watch radio on a video platform via my phone, if that makes sense. So when it comes to content now, it's not necessarily create more content. Google will tell you that, Facebook will tell you that, LinkedIn will tell you that, because they get paid off of your content. So so what is to do that, and you're the hero to them, and they're telling you that if you want to be big, create more content. But the people who are really doing well, the advanced marketers, it's not necessarily creating more content. They're taking one piece of content and getting the most out of it. So if you're going to be in the making content, it's not necessarily make more content, it's can I get the most out of this? Going back to film. Marvel, they have one film and trailers and ads and all of that around it to promote that one film. If you're B2B, you may have one major piece of content. That might be a white paper report. That might be a video or an advert or whatever it may be. And then it's the little pieces of content that you can curate, you can comment as well, or document, that sends people back to this big piece of content. Look at it like an album. I've worked, again, my background when I was at BBC, I was working at Radio 1 Extra, and I was there for almost 5 years. MySpace, I was pretty much working in entertainment, which music fell under me. So for about 10 years, I worked in the music industry. You've got to look at your main piece of content like an album. And every artist I come across, and I've met thousands who've got albums, they'll have an album and then they promote with smaller pieces of content, which will be their interviews or maybe whatever they're doing. That essentially is what we need to do in B2B. Things don't really change that much across different industries. Execution does. So the strategy stays roughly the same. It's the execution. So B2B, we might have a longer period. So that might be at 18 months that we've got to do the dance with someone before they make a decision. Touch points before someone makes a decision. In B2C, they say 7 hours. Now, I don't know who the they are, by the way. That's what roughly they say.
Yeah.
So these are some of the key things when it comes to creating content.
That was an awesome explanation, by the way. Thank you so much. I would expect that we're going to get a good, I'm hoping rather, Bina gives us a good thumbs up for that, or even a celebratory emoji. We'll see. Right, well, hey, you know what? I've actually got two more questions, and I do need to fit in before the end of the show. So, could I ask you for the things to avoid, the common mistakes which people make when it comes to storytelling, and how would you guide them to not make those mistakes?
Sure. I guess the number one mistake that organizations or B2B organizations make is they assume, whether they realize it or not, that they're not telling a story. And they say, okay, well, let's put out this, let's put out that. As I said, if you put anything on the internet, you are telling a story. So the first number one thing is to be aware that you're telling a story right now. As I said, it's probably a bad story. So that's the first thing, be aware. Okay, so that's the awareness stage. The second thing that I see when they're telling a story all goes back to not really being clear. As I said, a good story, story has structure. That's the whole idea of a story. And you, as I said, within the first 20, 25 minutes, who's the hero, what's stopping them, and what they have to do. If you don't, as I said, you say, I have no idea what's going on, or this film's slow. And this is a mistake that I see a lot of B2B organizations do consistently over the years. They might identify a persona, but it's still quite watered down on how they go about building that person's
journey.
That person. Not so much the journey. It's saying, okay, well, we've got Mitchell from Mitcham in Surrey. So we've got Mitchell from Mitcham in Surrey, and he is a B2B recruiter. Okay, Mitchell is 5'10". Mitchell has blonde hair. Mitchell loves the gym, and he is 26 years old, and he's got a girlfriend, and he's thinking about marriage and starting a family. And then you start drawing Mitch, and then they focus on, let's draw him. Send this over to an agency and let's draw what Mitchell looks like, so we've got someone to look at. And that's well and good, but actually, what makes Mitchell tick? What's stopping him achieving what is his ultimate goal? What's stopping him achieving that externally and internally? And this is what I'd say, this is the second mistake that I see organizations doing. They build a persona based on 2000, or based on its 1999. And actually we're in the digital world now, which means there's gonna be 50 Mitchells, and they're all gonna have different challenges, and we need to communicate to all of them. So how do you go? And that might sound a lot, but once you start doing it after a while, you can identify people's challenges quite quickly. You say, okay, this person looks like that, and we can group these for this campaign. This person and this person and this person, we can group them for that campaign. And these are some of the mistakes. I would say that's the two biggest mistakes. And the third one goes down to what I was saying. People act like they're Luke Skywalker. So like, hey, look at what we've done, and everything is about themselves, and they're selling themselves. And then to people, it just becomes spam. And once you become spam, forget it. It's very difficult to take something out of the spam folder and put it back into your inbox. It's exactly the same.
You get ignored and it's on to the next one. For the sake of a good mini summary right there, so could you just recap those three mistakes that people make?
Sure. So the first mistake is they almost ignore that they are telling a story. So the first mistake is they're not aware that they're telling a story, even though everybody is telling a story. The second mistake is they're not building the persona to the level that they should. And that is really going into the detail of internal things that affects that particular hero or the target audience. And the third mistake is they identify themselves as the hero, and they don't realize that actually that's not their role. Their role is to help. You want to be the mentor or the consultant or the teacher or whatever you want to call that person who appears in every single one of these type of films. And sometimes in some films, they're just in it for a couple of bits. So for example, if you look at The Devil Wears Prada, because it happens in rom-coms, and it's usually, does she get the guy? But in The Devil Wears Prada, it's the guy who works there, Stanley Tucci's character with the glasses. Whenever she was stuck, she went to him for help. But he wasn't in it for that much. So sometimes you just need to shut up and let the hero go on the journey. But when they need you, you're there and you can answer those questions. And that's key for B2B organizations.
Yes, you know what? Just as you were finishing saying it, I was thinking, you know what? That's a really nice way of explaining it for the benefit of B2B companies. Nice. Well, you know what? I think the final flourish for all of this would be to share with viewers where should a B2B marketer start with all of this. How do you take the first steps? And by the sounds of it, it sounds like there's some good reading that needs to be done. So,
yeah, definitely. So there's I don't know the link, but if you just type in Pixar storytelling course, and Pixar breaks down how they'll tell story, because Pixar, pretty much all their stories is the hero story, from Lion King to some of the ones that they tell. I can't remember all of them. Toy Story and all
Toy Story.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same journey that they tell. Actually, I don't know if Lion King's part of Pixar, but anyway, it's the same story. Disney as well. They're a good place to start to look at. As I said, there's a guy called Donald Miller who does one called Story Brand. He tells a good story as well. He's got a real good structure on what he does. So I like his stuff. If you just type in storytelling, digital storytelling, there's loads of blogs around this. And what you need to do is try to work out who is the person that you want to follow in this space. Now, for me, I got my structure when I was at the BBC. So that was more of an internal thing, and they won't put that online, I doubt. And plus, it was years ago when I'd done it. But always be looking at the best ways. Now, again, if you want to see on my site, I don't necessarily tell a story or talk about storytelling on my site just yet. I will eventually start breaking it down. But what you get on my site, and it's coming very, very, very soon, is case studies of companies that do it well. And I'll literally have a filter that says storytellers, B2B. Well, it'll just be storytellers, and it'll be a mixture of all companies that tell a good story. So I'll have that on my site, which is Andrew Miles Davis. That's AndrewMilesDavis.com. And yeah, that's kind of like where I would start. And again, if I'm on LinkedIn, Andrew M. Davis on LinkedIn, so feel free to drop me a message if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to help.
Perfect. Right. Wow. This has been unintentionally an extended version of the show, but I think entirely justified, though, at the same time. And I'm also particularly happy that the internet just about kept up and kept us on air. Because it's been dropping from... I've got this little green light that tells me how the stream's going, and it goes from green to orange, not good, to red occasionally. But on the monitor, we've stayed on air for the duration, so that's nice. Officially a success. There we go. Well, Andrew, thank you ever so much. So can you give us your web address one more time, and then your handle on LinkedIn so people can connect with you?
Yeah, so it's Andrew Miles Davis, and Davis is spelled Davis. So Miles Davis, like the Daz player. AndrewMilesDavis.com. That's my website. And on LinkedIn, I am linkedin.com/in/Andrew M for Miles Davis.
Perfect. Well, Andrew, thank you ever so much for joining me on the show this afternoon. This has been quite a treat, and I really hope that the viewers have enjoyed it massively as well. So, Andrew, live from Moraya in Spain, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hi. And indeed, yes, I really hope that you've enjoyed watching this afternoon as well. If you haven't already subscribed, then please do. The414.net for all subscription options and all of our previous episodes. It's on there, and you can get the show on video podcast on Apple iTunes, as well as on all of the other podcasting apps as well. There we go. So if you'd like to continue to build your professional knowledge and expand it each and every week with hearing from some of the greatest and most interesting minds in B2B marketing, then the 414 is very much for you. Thank you so much for watching. My name's James Rostance, and I'll see you same time next week.